ambiguous parts of modern life, and we give you a map and hopefully compass. I'm your host, and with me, as always, is our resident intellectual adventurer. We almost didn't make it to the studio today.
We almost did.
Because you were deep in a, let's call it a spirited discussion about the structural integrity of my new kitchen chairs. I swear, nothing is safe from your analytical eye.
Well, every structure requires a solid foundation, doesn't it?
I so.
Whether it's a chair or a relationship. And yes, after a brief but I think very necessary analysis of the tensile strength of flat pack furniture, I am ready to apply that highly specialized knowledge to today's topic.
Oh, man.
Which is, of course, the often shaky, often confusing foundation of modern romantic dynamics.
Perfect. Because if there's one area of life right now that feels like it desperately needs a map, it is romance. I mean, seriously, in 2026, we're operating in a world where the rules seem to change every week.
Oh, constantly.
You need a scorecard just to figure out if you're actually dating someone or if you've just, I don't know, entered into some complex multi-week text exchange that has its own unique laws of physics.
That's absolutely true. Historically, courtship had clear, if sometimes pretty restrictive, milestones. You knew where you stood, even if you didn't like the spot.
Right.
Today, the milestones are less defined, and the terminology is just multiplying so fast. Situationship, slow burn, ghosting, breadcrumbing.
All these new words.
And instead of bringing any clarity, they just seem to be creating this entirely new lexicon of confusion, one that honestly often just masks emotional manipulation.
And that is exactly our mission today. We're diving deep into these gray areas to define these confusing modern dynamics. We want to understand the mechanics of the situationship, explore the surprisingly wonderful revival of the slow burn as an antidote to all this burnout. And then we have to dissect the toxic digital low blows, like ghosting and breadcrumbing. We want to cut through all that ambiguity so you, the listener, feel armed with some real knowledge.
And my hope is that by defining these terms and really understanding the psychology behind them, specifically that push and pull between stability and anxiety, you can gain some agency.
Right.
Because while dating has always been messy, let's be honest.
Of course.
Knowing precisely where you stand, or maybe more importantly, knowing where the other person is trying to make you stand, that is the first and most critical step toward self-preservation. And, eventually finding a meaningful, sustainable connection.
Okay, let's unpack this with a clear structure. Let's start at the bottom of the romantic ambiguity pool and work our way up. So, section 1.
Yeah.
Defining the gray zones.
Okay.
We have two major non-committal stages that I think really confuse people because they look kind of similar on the surface. Level 1, the talking phase, and level 2, the dreaded situationship. Let's treat this like a two-level system in a dating video game.
Oh, that video game analogy is spot on. It's perfect because level 1, the talking phase, is the absolute starting point. It's the mandatory tutorial.
Tutorial, yes.
It's the data gathering phase before you even commit to leaving the starting gate.
Right. So it's when you've matched on an app or maybe you met at a party and now the communication is pretty consistent, but it's still surface level. It's almost all texting, right? Or maybe a few short calls.
Primarily, yes. This phase is characterized by really low physical investment and, crucially, a very low emotional expectation. The communication itself is the main activity, maybe the only activity.
So you're just trading information.
You are. You're exchanging basic data points in pretty rapid succession, just hoping to build a rudimentary profile of the other person.
So we're talking about those foundational questions, like are you a dog person or a cat person? Where did you grow up? What kind of work do you do?
What's your favorite movie? All of that.
Essential stuff, sure. But they aren't these, deeply intimate revelations about trauma or what you want in 10 years.
Precisely. And if you are in a talking phase that lasts longer than, say, 2 weeks without a firm date being set, you are probably starting to invest more time than the dynamic really warrants.
Okay, that's a good benchmark.
The commitment status here is just exploration. It's explicitly light, there is no physical commitment, and no deep emotional tie exists yet. In fact, if the dynamic does include, significant physical intimacy or intense emotional vulnerability in level 1, that's often a major red flag.
Why is that?
Because it suggests someone is trying to shortcut the vetting process to create a sense of intimacy that hasn't actually been earned yet.
Got it. So the entire purpose of level 1 is just to gather enough of those basic details to justify investing actual time and effort, meaning the first or second date. It's a vetting process before the real dating begins.
It's the data collection stage, and that speed is key. The transaction here is information for potential time investment. Now, here's where people make mistakes.
Okay.
They start emotionally investing level 2 or level 3 expectations into this very simple screening process.
And if you start treating the talking phase like it's a committed partnership, analyzing how long it takes them to text back, feeling jealous about other people they might be talking to, you were just setting yourself up for disappointment. Because the implicit agreement of level 1 is that the connection is entirely conditional. It's pending further review.
Exactly. It's a necessary stage to test the waters, but it is not a relationship. It's an audition.
An audition. I like that.
And the energy you expend should be minimal. It should be focused entirely on assessing whether the basic facts align well enough to move to the next stage. If they don't, or if the person refuses to commit to that first date, you move on immediately. It should be low friction, high turnover.
Okay, that clarifies the initial stage perfectly. Now let's move on to level 2. This is where things get significantly stickier, and I think where a lot of genuine emotional damage often happens.
Yeah.
The situationship.
Yes.
You describe this as the level where the game often gets stuck. It's trapped between potential and reality.
Absolutely. The situationship has progressed way beyond the basic light communication of level 1. This dynamic has all the visible characteristics, or you could say the necessary ingredients of a real partnership.
Like what?
Shared time, intimacy, social knowledge. But it is deliberately missing the most important ingredient.
Which is?
The label and the future commitment that comes with it.
So we're talking about actual activities that mimic a real commitment. And this goes on for a while, right?
Yeah.
Often months.
Oh, yes. Months, sometimes longer.
Things like spending multiple nights a week together, consistent intimate engagement, maybe you even travel together for a weekend, or you're integrated into each other's friend groups. But the minute you ask, so what are we? The walls go up.
Precisely. If we were making a psychological checklist for a situationship, it includes all those things.
Right.
Shared time, physical intimacy, and social integration. It looks, it tastes, and it smells like a committed relationship, but when you ask for that definition, you're met with the famous no-label zone.
Characterized by those maddening phrases we hear all the time, we're just chilling. Or, my personal favorite, the eternally frustrating, I don't want to put a label on it.
Or the slightly more passive-aggressive, we're just seeing where it goes.
Ugh, yes.
These phrases are the linguistic markers of level 2 being stuck. They serve as a gatekeeping mechanism. They're designed to protect the relationship from the expectations of commitment.
It's clearly romantic, but...
It's romantic, but the lack of a defined label means the arrangement is inherently protected from future expectation, future planning, or, future responsibility.
But I need to challenge this a little bit, because sometimes things are just genuinely moving slowly. So how do we tell the difference between a situationship and, say, a slow burn, which we're going to talk about later, one that's just taking its time? We need those hard boundary markers.
That's a crucial distinction, and this is where we need to move beyond just feelings and look at the actions that define a partnership. A slow-moving relationship still moves forward. A situationship is designed to maintain a holding pattern.
Okay, so what's an example of that?
Ask yourself, are you introduced to casual friends, or are you introduced to core family members? Situationships almost never include introductions to highly valued family because that implies permanence and a shared history.
That's a big one. And what about more practical, logistical things?
Think about logistical inclusion. Are you named as an emergency contact on their forms?
That's a good one.
Do you discuss joint future planning, like booking a trip 6 months from now or talking about saving for something major together? Does the person lean on you for emotional support during a serious crisis, or only for companionship when things are easy?
Right.
A situationship avoids all forms of hard commitment. If they won't even leave a toothbrush at your place after months, that's a situationship. If they won't list you as an emergency contact, that is a situationship. These markers show a tangible lack of structural integration into one another's core life despite how much time you're spending together.
So the core difference is intent and status quo. The talking phase is intended to lead somewhere. It's an initial brief discovery phase.
Right.
But the situationship is designed, almost by necessity, to stay exactly where it is. This comfortable but totally undefined plateau.
That's the definitive distinction. The talking phase is a launch pad. The situationship is a defined status quo of long-term ambiguity. The people involved have settled into a routine that satisfies immediate needs: companionship, intimacy, easy connection. but it specifically rejects the developmental pressure and accountability of a committed relationship.
We have to talk about why people actively choose this. Because on the surface, sacrificing stability for this kind of intense, long-term ambiguity, it just seems counterintuitive to our basic human need for connection and security.
It's not counterintuitive when you look at it through the lens of self-preservation and, frankly, convenience. For the person who is driving the ambiguity, the one who is reluctant to put a label on it, the situationship is a safety mechanism, and it's a powerful source of control. They desire all the benefits of a partner, the intimacy, the company, the shared experiences, the emotional labor,
Good.
but without the weight of accountability that comes with a formal label.
They want the relationship experience without the contractual obligations. But let's elaborate on what those obligations really are. What are they specifically trying to avoid?
A label implies three key things that the situationship driver wants to avoid. First, exclusivity. That's the limitation of their choice. Second, future planning, which means sacrificing their immediate autonomy. And third, and this is the most important one, emotional accountability.
What do you mean by that?
A label means you owe the other person a difficult conversation if you want to leave, or if you make a mistake. By avoiding the label, they reserve the right to prioritize their own needs without having to communicate, or to leave without the perceived obligation of a formal breakup.
So they're preserving their own autonomy at the expense of the other person's security.
That's it, exactly.
They're essentially running on emotional credit. They're benefiting from the other person's emotional investment without providing the necessary collateral of commitment. It really sounds like running up emotional debt.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. Emotional debt. Because the recipient is typically putting in level 3 energy, the effort and vulnerability of a fully committed partner, while the relationship itself is contractually capped at level 2.
That imbalance.
The asymmetry of investment is the fuel for the situationship.
But if they're prioritizing their own self-preservation, what's the consequence for the other person, the one who, typically desires more commitment and definition?
The downside is severe. While the initiator sees it as self-preservation, the recipient experiences it as a genuine anxiety ship. Ambiguity breeds anxiety, plain and simple.
Of course.
As time goes on, it's typical for the person who is investing more, usually the one who feels less in control, to eventually want a clear definition. But the other person is content with the no-strings-attached status quo because it perfectly serves their needs.
That internal conflict must be completely exhausting. You're constantly monitoring the relationship for signs of progression that never actually come, which means the relationship itself is a source of anxiety rather than support.
It's so emotionally taxing. The recipient is stuck in this loop of hope and disappointment. They're fully invested, but they are suspended in chronic uncertainty. Recognizing the psychological motive that the situationship exists primarily to protect the freedom of one party and is based on that asymmetrical investment is the first crucial step toward deciding if that arrangement serves you.
Yeah.
Because often the only way out is to recognize that level 2 is not going to magically turn into level 3 just by waiting longer.
That clarity is so vital. So what is the counter reaction to all this ambiguity and anxiety and, eventual burnout? If people are tired of level 2 being this psychological dead end, where are they shifting their focus?
And that brings us beautifully to our next section, which is a much healthier, much more intentional trend, the revival of the slow burn.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. You mentioned that the slow burn is a 2026 trend specifically because people are they're fatigued by the fast, confusing, high-anxiety situationship model. It's a deliberate choice for stability and for mental health.
It is a deliberate and rational counter-reaction to systemic dating burnout. For decades, particularly in Western media, romantic comedies, we were conditioned to believe in love at first sight.
Oh, totally. The you just know moment.
The sudden, intense, you just know phenomenon. And that implies that if the chemistry isn't explosive right away, it isn't real. The slow burn stands in direct opposition to that entire narrative.
So it rejects that idea.
It completely rejects the idea that a relationship has to start with some massive, explosive, immediate chemical reaction.
Instead, it's a romance that grows slowly and intentionally, and usually it starts from a solid existing base of platonic connection. It's the classic friends to lovers trope.
Yes.
A dynamic we used to see mostly in fiction, but now people are actively seeking it out in real life as a safer, more reliable path.
Precisely. The mechanism of the slow burn is rooted in pre-existing social trust and shared history. It means the romantic element only appears or is cultivated after a deep, stable foundation of friendship has already been established.
This isn't just waiting 6 months to define a relationship.
No, it's about spending 6 months or a year seeing this person purely as a reliable, honest friend first.
That makes profound sense as an antidote to the high-pressure, superficial world of modern dating apps, where the whole interaction is designed around instant, surface-level attraction and fast swipes.
The high-speed model of dating apps encourages rapid judgment based on limited, highly curated data. The slow burn forces a deliberate delay, allowing the relationship dynamics to unfold organically, away from the intense performance anxiety and the emotional rush of a traditional first date with a total stranger. It's an investment in process.
So, why the appeal? You identified the core motivation as a deep desire for safety and stability. Let's dive into what that security actually provides for a person.
The security comes from data acquisition, specifically high-quality longitudinal data.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
In a slow burn, you already know the person deeply, which significantly de-risks the emotional and time investment. You've observed their character in a multitude of non-romantic, often high-stress contexts.
So you've already seen how they handle a difficult work deadline, or how they talk to a waiter when they're frustrated.
Exactly. You've seen how they react when they're disappointed, or even how they behave when they're sick, long before you ever had to worry about them potentially breaking your heart.
You have the full context of their baseline personality.
Yes, you can identify their true behavioral patterns, their red flags, and just as importantly, their green flags, before you are so emotionally invested that you start overlooking them. The judgment is based on observed, consistent behavior over time, not manufactured chemistry over a single high-stakes dinner date.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here. This is the inevitable question everyone asks about the slow burn.
I know where you're going with this.
Doesn't waiting 6 months or a year mean you risk getting friend-zoned permanently? Or that you potentially wasted all that valuable dating time only to discover the romantic chemistry just isn't there, making the whole thing a failure?
That is the fear, isn't it? The fear of the friend zone is your system one thinking, panicking about lost opportunities.
Yeah.
But let's actually analyze the risk.
Okay.
If you spend 6 months in a situationship, you risk deep emotional trauma, confusion, and anxiety, only to find out the other person was never serious. That's a guaranteed emotional loss.
Right.
If you spend 6 months building a slow burn, you risk remaining great friends. That is a net gain, not a loss. The risk of the situationship is emotionally catastrophic. The risk of the slow burn is minimal.
That reframes the risk assessment perfectly. You're trading potential catastrophic failure for predictable stability.
And regarding the chemistry, if the romantic chemistry doesn't show up after a year of deep friendship, then you've simply confirmed that the relationship was never meant to evolve romantically. But you still have a valuable friend.
You haven't lost time.
You haven't lost time? You've successfully completed a high-quality vetting process without all the emotional performance anxiety. There's no need to perform or put on a mask of perfection for a first date because you've both already seen each other on your bad days.
Your messy days.
Your boring days, your messy days. The vulnerability is already built in through the friendship, which actually accelerates the deep emotional intimacy that allows a partnership to last.
This shift is neatly summarized by moving from prioritizing chemistry first to prioritizing compatibility first. I love the lightning and campfire analogy you use. Let's expand on the deep difference between those two forces.
Okay, so chemistry is the immediate spark. It's that visceral hormonal attraction, that sudden feeling of excitement and intensity. It's often driven by novelty and surface-level cues.
And it can be misleading.
Very misleading, because it's based on instinct and immediate gratification, which can feel addictive.
That's the flash of lightning.
Yeah.
It's bright, it's exciting, it makes everything visible for a brief moment, gives you that intense rush. But then, just as quickly as it appears, it disappears, leaving you in the dark, maybe a little confused and singed.
Yes.
And you realize that lightning strike didn't actually illuminate anything about the person's real character.
Perfect description of the volatility of pure chemistry. Chemistry is fleeting and often masks deep incompatibilities in values or communication styles or just lifestyle. It draws you in quickly, often before your critical brain can even engage.
Right.
Compatibility, on the other hand, is built on shared values, complementary life goals, communication styles that sync up under pressure, and mutual respect that's been established outside of physical attraction.
And compatibility is the campfire.
Yes.
It takes a while to gather the kindling. Maybe it even takes some effort to get the spark going and shield it from the wind. But once it's started, it provides warmth and sustenance for a long, sustained time.
That is the core utility of the slow burn. You are investing in long-term, reliable warmth. You are not chasing the lightning flash, which is addictive but unsustainable. You're looking for a reliable, steady source of heat.
And we're seeing this in the real world.
We are. This trend is so visible now that dating app users are proactively adjusting their profiles. They'll state they are looking for a slow burn or friends first. They're signaling to potential matches that they prioritize established safety and deep connection over immediate excitement.
It's a really smart use of filtering. You're filtering for people who value process and maturity and long-term stability over instant gratification and impulsive connection. It's basically a public statement. I reject the situationship model.
Absolutely. They are broadcasting an intent that rejects volatility and champions emotional maturity. They're saying, I am willing to wait for a connection that is built to last rather than one that's built to burn out.
You brought up a psychological concept that's really foundational to this whole trend. You said the slow burn is a direct reaction to burnout and encourages a necessary move from System 1 thinking to System 2 thinking. Let's drill into that cognitive mechanic for the listener, because this is where the deep dive really happens.
Okay, so this concept, which was popularized by behavioral science, describes two fundamental ways our brains make decisions. System 1 is fast, automatic, intuitive, emotional. It relies heavily on heuristics, mental shortcuts, and instinct.
So when you look at a profile picture and immediately feel a powerful attraction, or when you meet someone and think, I need to see them again just based on their charisma, that's System 1.
That is your System 1 at work. It's the impulsive gut reaction, often driven by immediate physical attraction or a rush of novelty. The heuristic would be judging their entire character based only on their job title or their ability to make you laugh on that first meeting.
And the high-speed, superficial environment of modern dating incentivizes System 1 thinking.
It does. You have to make these split-second, high-volume decisions. Swipe left, swipe right. This leads to profound dating errors because System 1 is prone to confirmation bias. You see what you want to see. And it often overlooks subtle red flags in the rush of immediate excitement.
So if you're burned out from those fast, dead-end talking phases, you're tired of your System 1 making poor choices for you. Choices that prioritize chemistry over, say, core value alignment.
Precisely. The slow burn forces the activation of System 2 thinking. The system is slow, intentional, deliberate, effortful. It focuses on logic, deep analysis, and reasoning. By interacting with someone as a friend first, you are intentionally slowing the decision process down, giving System 2 the time and space it needs to operate.
You're shifting from just gathering data points on physical symmetry to gathering crucial data on shared values and long-term compatibility. We should detail what System 2 is actually assessing here.
System 2 requires effort and, crucially, time. So what is it assessing? It's assessing the core structural elements of a viable long-term partnership that System 1 just ignores. We're talking about conflict resolution styles. How do they handle a disagreement when they aren't trying to impress you? We're assessing financial compatibility. Do your saving and spending habits align? Or is this going to be a source of inevitable friction? We're evaluating shared life purpose. Do you both want to live in the city or the country? Do you share core values on family or career ambition or social causes?
And because you have that shared history of friendship, you have observational evidence of their behavior under non-romantic duress.
You have empirical proof. You can predict conflict outcomes based on how they handled stress when you were just a friend. You know their coping mechanisms, their worst habits, and their most reliable strengths.
Right.
When the pressure of immediate romance and performance is removed, the brain has the necessary space and time to shift its focus from instinctual attraction to assessing those deeply foundational shared values. The slow burn isn't just a trend. It's a calculated, rational, cognitive strategy to make better, more sustainable relationship decisions by demanding the input of System 2.
That is truly profound. It's actively using a tested framework from behavioral science to build a more resilient love life. It means accepting that good things often require effort and time, and that instant gratification is usually a poor predictor of success in relationships.
It is. It's realizing that the most sustainable connections require intentionality and effort, and that those factors just cannot flourish in a rush or under the duress of a situationship.
We've covered the ambiguous gray zones and the healthy, intentional counterreaction. But now we have to address the toxic tools of the digital age. This is the section on ghosting and breadcrumbing. And we really must analyze their real, measurable psychological impact on you, the listener, because the consequences of these behaviors are They're far from trivial.
These behaviors are so frustrating because they exploit the very mechanisms of uncertainty we just discussed. But they do so in a deliberately passive-aggressive or sometimes outright manipulative way. They rely entirely on the low friction and low accountability offered by digital communication.
Let's start with ghosting. It's almost universally accepted as cruel because it substitutes total silence for just basic human respect. Can you define it for us clearly?
Ghosting is when someone who has been communicating with you or who you've been actively dating and developing a connection with simply stops responding. They vanish entirely.
Or goodbye.
No communication, no goodbye, no explanation, no closure. They disappear like a ghost.
It's the ultimate avoidance technique. Instead of having a difficult but necessary conversation that requires a minimum level of emotional courage, they choose total silence and low-cost evasion.
It is avoidance at its most severe, and it's considered worse than a standard explicit rejection because it completely lacks closure.
Yes. Closure.
Humans are psychologically wired to seek completion and certainty. When a relationship or even a dating dynamic ends, we need an explanation, even a poor, flimsy one, to file it away neatly in our mental archive.
Right.
We need to understand why so we can adapt.
Without that explanation, the file just stays open in your brain, constantly demanding resources. It's like an intellectual and emotional processing debt.
Exactly. When you get ghosted, your brain goes into intense overdrive because it detects a social threat, the sudden, unexplained loss of a resource. The mind cannot accept the silence. It has to find the reason to restore certainty. So the ghosted person starts intensely self-interrogating. They begin this torturous emotional audit of their own recent behavior and conversation.
They question everything minute by minute. Was it something I said last Tuesday when we were talking about my work? Was I too available? Was I too boring? Did they find someone better? This intense circular thinking is the toxic consequence of that lack of closure.
The absence of external data forces the blame inward. Since the ghoster provides no objective reason for leaving, the victim's brain fills that information vacuum with negative assumptions about their own character and worth. They internalize the rejection and often arrive at conclusions that are far more damaging than the truth would have been.
And the psychological sting is amplified because the uncertainty prevents your brain from transitioning out of the attachment phase. Your brain is actively trying to solve a puzzle that has missing pieces, and you always assign those missing pieces a negative value to yourself.
It is a form of emotional trauma because it undermines the reality of the connection that did exist. The person is left wondering, did I imagine that? Did that connection mean anything at all if they could just erase me and my feelings so easily? It is corrosive to self-worth, and it makes it harder to trust future connections because the foundation of safety has been undermined by this sudden, inexplicable vanishing.
Okay, so ghosting is cruel silence. Breadcrumbing, on the other hand, is cruel noise. This one, to me, feels actively and coldly manipulative because it sustains false hope purely for the sender's benefit.
It is manipulative because it is purely selfish and designed to manage a resource for later use. Breadcrumbing is a calculated tactic where an individual has absolutely no serious intention of dating you or forming a situationship or moving forward, but they send these small intermittent breadcrumbs of attention purely to maintain your interest and prevent you from moving on.
Can you give us some tangible, real-world examples of those crumbs? Because sometimes they're subtle enough that they can be easily confused with genuine interest.
They're low effort and non-committal by design. It could be a sporadic, hey, thinking of you, text sent late on a Friday night, precisely when the sender is lonely and vetting their options.
Right.
It might be a random, like, on an Instagram photo you posted 3 weeks ago, or a highly generic emoji reaction to a story that requires no response or investment from them. Crucially, any attempt you make to schedule a concrete future date is either ignored or met with indefinite postponement.
It's like they're sending a flare into the sky every few weeks just to make sure you're still orbiting them, still available, still emotionally captive.
That's precisely the goal. The goal is to keep the recipient on the bench, ensuring they remain an available option, an emotional insurance policy for the sender for when they are lonely or bored or their primary focus falls through.
And the sender gets to maintain total control.
Total control. They keep their option open, they gain validation, and all without any corresponding emotional investment.
And this leads us to the addictive mechanism you described. Breadcrumbing creates a variable reward schedule in the brain. Here is where we need to connect this to the deepest part of the dive and explain why this is so physiologically dangerous.
The variable reward schedule is a core principle in behavioral psychology and addiction. It means the reward, the attention, the text, the compliment, the brief burst of hope is delivered at completely unpredictable, intermittent intervals. It's not consistent, it is random. The recipient never knows when the next hit of attention is coming, or if it's coming at all.
And we know from decades of research that uncertainty is actually more addictive than certainty. Why is that?
Because the unpredictability forces the brain into a high state of vigilance and hope, which maximizes the release of dopamine when the reward finally appears. It is the exact same psychological logic that makes gambling, specifically slot machines, so incredibly addictive.
Like, right, the slot machine.
When you pull the lever on a slot machine, you might win or you might not. The uncertainty of the outcome is what increases the thrill and the dopamine response when the reward finally shows up.
So the person getting the breadcrumbs isn't waiting for a relationship. They're waiting for the chemical rush associated with the random, intermittent text message. They're addicted to the possibility of the reward, not the actual sender.
Precisely. They stay engaged, they wait, they constantly monitor their phone, and they analyze every minimal interaction because they are conditioned to hope for the next unpredictable hit of attention. This reinforces the attachment not to the person's character, but to the potential reward they might deliver. This constant cycling between high-level anxiety and a brief, intense burst of gratification when the crumb appears keeps the recipient emotionally trapped and actively unable to detach, which is why it is truly a toxic and calculating form of manipulation.
So if the digital dating world provides these toxic tools, ghosting and breadcrumbing, the only real defense is strong internal armor and clear external boundaries. We need to focus on strategies for self-preservation that give the listener real, actionable steps to gain agency back.
Absolutely. Protecting yourself from these behaviors comes down to recognizing the pattern and asserting boundaries. You have to move the focus from that obsessive internal question, why did they do this to me, to the assertive external statement, what do I deserve?
Let's start with the breadcrumbing situation, since that's the one where the listener still has some control over the communication exchange. What's the immediate, actionable step to break that variable reward cycle?
If you recognize that you are being breadcrumbed, that the communication is minimal, sporadic, and never leads to concrete planning or commitment, you have to enact a total communication blackout with that person. You must stop responding to the crumbs entirely.
That's it.
The breadcrumbs only work if you pick them up. If you break the variable reward cycle, you starve their addiction and you broke their control over your emotional state.
But stopping is hard because the anxiety kicks in immediately. How does the listener manage this psychological withdrawal from that addictive reward cycle?
This requires a boundary strategy. First, physically silence or block the notifications from that person for 30 days. You need to reduce the external trigger. Second, implement a replacement activity. When you feel that intense urge to check your phone, or respond or analyze a crumb, you must immediately pivot to a positive, self-affirming activity. Call a trusted friend, work out, read a book, engage in a hobby. You are teaching your brain to seek dopamine from healthy, predictable sources rather than the toxic, unpredictable source of the crumb.
And what about the crucial internal boundary, the self-talk the listener needs to adopt to stop chasing those scraps?
That self-talk has to be an unshakable assertion of your worth. It must be a clear daily mantra, recognizing and clearly stating, I deserve the whole meal, not just the scraps.
I love that.
You are stating that you value consistent, intentional investment over sporadic, low-effort attention. That boundary assertion is paramount to exiting the anxiety ship.
Now, what about the listener who is stuck in a situationship level 2 and knows they need a label, but they're afraid of confronting the ambiguity? We need a script for that. Define the relationship conversation, the DTR.
For a situationship, the only path to closure or progression is the DTR conversation. And it has to be framed not as a request, but as an assertion of your needs.
How do you do that?
Choose a calm, non-confrontational time and use phrases that focus on your needs, not their failings. A strong script would be something like, I really value the time we spend together and I enjoy our connection, but I need to know we are working toward the same goal. I need clarity and commitment to move forward. If we are going to continue spending this much time together, I need to know we are exclusive and intending to build a future together.
And if they respond with one of the classic euphemisms, like, I just want to see where it goes, what's the boundary then?
You must set a non-negotiable time limit. framed as a choice for your future. You can say, I understand that, but I know what I need. And for me, seeing where it goes without a defined status creates unnecessary anxiety. I am committing to defining this relationship within the next month, either with a clear partnership label or by mutually deciding to walk away so I can find a connection that meets my needs for stability.
That shifts the power dynamic instantly.
It asserts control over your own time and your emotional future, regardless of their choice.
And finally, for the listener who has been ghosted, we established that the fault is not theirs, but how do they internalize that and achieve the closure they didn't get from the other person?
Reframing ghosting is the cognitive key. Since the ghoster refused to provide external closure, you must consciously and repeatedly grant it to yourself.
Ow.
When you're ghosted, you have to consciously assign the failure where it belongs. The act of ghosting is a reflection of the other person's severe character flaw, specifically their lack of emotional maturity, their inability to handle discomfort, and their communication deficit.
So if they can't give you closure, you have to grant it to yourself by assigning the failure to them where it belongs and just refusing to internalize the silence.
Exactly. You acknowledge the pain of the rejection, which is real, but you reassign the reason for the pain. The rejection was not about who you are, your value, attractiveness, or potential. It was about their fundamental inability to be responsible for their own choices and communications. That shift is challenging, but it is the necessary internal boundary that allows the brain to move from that obsessive audit cycle to healthy detachment and healing.
And you consciously decide that someone who handles rejection that poorly is not a partner worthy of your time anyway.
That's the end goal, yes.
This has been a necessary and a deeply analytical journey through the modern romantic landscape. We started in the level 1 talking phase, navigated the high anxiety level 2 situationship, found safety and rationality in the slow burn, and identified the toxic tactics of digital dating.
The overarching theme that really binds all these dynamics together, whether you're navigating ambiguity or choosing stability, is intentionality. The confusion, the anxiety, the disappointment. It only arises when intentionality is lacking, either on your part or, more commonly, on the part of the person you are dating.
So if we empower the listener with one final unified takeaway, it's about agency. You are not a passive observer in your own love life. You are the chief architect of your emotional boundaries.
Don't be afraid to take that agency. We covered 4 clear empowerment points today that are just non-negotiable for mental health in this dating landscape.
Let's recap them.
1, don't be afraid to ask for a clear label and set a deadline for commitment when the situation demands clarity. 2, don't be afraid to choose the pace and go slow, deliberately activating that critical system 2 thinking over blind instinct. 3, don't be afraid to walk away decisively from someone who only offers crumbs. You deserve the whole meal. And 4, understand that your value is not determined by someone else's inability or lack of courage to communicate maturely.
Okay, so if the slow burn model is proving to be the most viable path to stability, since it's rooted in pre-existing friendship and established compatibility, a triumph of System 2 thinking, then this raises an important final question for all of us to consider as we wrap up this deep dive. Since the high-speed dating app environment prioritizes instant visual traction and quick swiping, that impulsive System 1 thinking is the structure of modern dating itself fundamentally designed to actively work against the safest and most stable path to a long-term partnership.
That is the ultimate provocative thought we have to leave you with. If the data shows that deep, slow vetting through friendship yields the highest quality, most resilient relationships, we have to question whether the default mechanism of meeting new people today is setting us up for predictable failure and exhaustion.
Wow.
It forces us to ask, if we want stability, must we intentionally look beyond the high-speed, swipe-based systems that are engineered for immediate engagement and superficial novelty rather than deep, slow investment?
A question for you, the listener, to mull over as you navigate your week. Thank you for your brilliant guidance through the blurry lines of modern connection.
Thank you. It was a necessary journey to provide that clarity and those actionable tools.
And for you, our listener, we want to help you take action immediately. We've put a resource in our show notes, a comprehensive healthy dating checklist. It's designed to help you identify with certainty if the dynamic you are in is an unhealthy, stuck situationship or a genuine healthy slow burn. It includes specific markers for level 2 ambiguity and tools for self-assessment. Check it out. Stay strong, stay honest, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.